The lost African empire more advanced than Europe. In the year 1324, something extraordinary happened that would reshape the medieval world's understanding of wealth and power. A single man's journey across continents caused the price of gold to plummet for an entire decade. European cartographers scrambled to redraw their maps. Middle Eastern chroniclers documented events so remarkable they bordered on the mythical. This man ruled an empire that stretched across an area larger than all of Western Europe combined. An empire whose universities rivaled Oxford and the Sorbonne centuries before the Renaissance reached its peak. An empire whose technological innovations and architectural marvels defied everything medieval Europe believed about African civilization. Yet today, this empire remains largely forgotten by mainstream history, its achievements buried beneath centuries of colonial narratives and deliberate erasure. Welcome to the story of the Mali Empire, a civilization that once controlled nearly half of the world's gold supply, built universities when most of Europe was illiterate, and created architectural wonders that still stand today as testaments to African ingenuity. The Mali Empire existed from approximately 1226 to 1610, founded by the legendary Sundiata Keita around 1235. But it was under the rule of Mansa Musa, who ascended to power in 1312, that this West African empire would achieve heights of prosperity and influence that Europe wouldn't match for centuries. To understand the true scale of Mali's advancement, we must first grasp what Europe looked like during this same period. While Mansa Musa was constructing architectural marvels and funding centers of learning, most European cities were plagued by poor sanitation, widespread illiteracy, and technological stagnation. The average European peasant lived in squalor, while Mali's citizens enjoyed organized trade networks, advanced metallurgy, and sophisticated governmental systems. Using his large army, Musa doubled the empire's territory, but military conquest was only part of Mali's expansion strategy. The empire's true power lay in its control of something more valuable than land itself: the trans-Saharan trade routes that connected sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean world. Salt was a major commodity traded from the north, while from the south came gold and ivory. This positioning made Mali the crucial intermediary in a trade network that spanned continents. But what truly set Mali apart wasn't just its wealth, it was what they did with that wealth. In 1324, Mansa Musa embarked on his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca. This wasn't merely a religious journey, it was a calculated display of power that would announce Mali's presence to the medieval world in the most spectacular way imaginable. What really put him on the world stage was his famous Hajj, pilgrimage, to Mecca in 1324. Musa traveled with a caravan of 60,000 people, including 12,000 slaves dressed in Persian silk, each carrying 4 pounds of gold. The emperor himself distributed so much gold in Cairo and Mecca that he single-handedly disrupted the Mediterranean economy. The impact was so profound that for the next decade, gold prices remained depressed across North Africa and the Middle East. European traders, completely unaware of Mali's existence, suddenly found their economic calculations upended by the actions of an African emperor they had never heard of. But Mansa Musa's pilgrimage revealed something far more significant than mere wealth. On his return journey, he brought with him Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, a renowned Islamic scholar and architect from Granada. Mansa Musa then built the Jingoreber Mosque, paying the renowned Islamic scholar Abu Ishaq al-Sahili 200 kilograms of gold to oversee its construction. The architectural innovations that followed would create a distinctly African style that influenced construction across West Africa for centuries. Malian architecture developed during this period, creating the distinctive Sudano-Sahelian style that we see in structures like the Great Mosque of Djenné, which remains the largest mud brick building in the world. These weren't primitive constructions. The engineering required to create multi-story buildings from mud brick, designed to withstand both the harsh Saharan winds and seasonal flooding, represented sophisticated understanding of material science and environmental adaptation that European builders of the time simply didn't possess. However, Mali's most revolutionary achievement wasn't architectural, it was educational. In the city of Timbuktu, 3 great centers of learning emerged: the mosques of Sankore, Jingoreber, and Sidi Yahya. Together, they formed what became known as the University of Timbuktu. Sankore was a contemporary of Oxford and the Sorbonne, but in many ways it surpassed both European institutions. While European universities focused primarily on theology and classical texts, Timbuktu's scholars studied mathematics, astronomy, medicine, law, literature, and natural sciences. The university's library contained over 700,000 manuscripts, making it one of the largest collections of written knowledge in the medieval world. Think about this for a moment. While most Europeans couldn't read or write, Timbuktu was producing original research in advanced mathematics and astronomical observations. African scholars were calculating planetary movements and performing complex surgical procedures, while European medicine still relied largely on bloodletting and superstition. The sophistication of Mali's educational system becomes even more remarkable when we consider its scope. Timbuktu was an intellectual and spiritual capital and a center for the propagation of Islam throughout Africa in the 15th and 16th centuries. Students traveled from across Africa and the Islamic world to study in Timbuktu, creating an international scholarly community that rivaled anything Europe could offer. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. If you're enjoying this exploration into lost civilizations and hidden history, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these forgotten stories of African excellence. As European colonial ambitions grew in the 16th and 17th centuries, the Mali Empire faced increasing pressure. The Atlantic slave trade disrupted traditional trade routes and social structures. Portuguese and later other European powers began establishing coastal trading posts that bypassed Mali's inland trade networks. The empire was founded by Sundiata Keita circa 1214 c. 1255, and became renowned for the wealth of its rulers, especially Mansa Musa, Musa Keita. But by 1610, the empire had fractured into smaller kingdoms, unable to maintain control over its vast territories. The deliberate erasure of Mali's achievements began almost immediately. Colonial historians, uncomfortable with evidence of advanced African civilizations, systematically downplayed or ignored Mali's contributions to world history. Universities were described as primitive religious schools. Architectural marvels were dismissed as curiosities. The sophisticated trade networks were reframed as simple bartering systems. This wasn't accidental. Acknowledging Mali's technological and cultural achievements would have undermined the colonial narrative that portrayed Africans as primitive peoples in need of European civilization. The truth that Africa had produced some of the most advanced civilizations in medieval history was too dangerous to colonial economic interests. Even today, most history textbooks allocate barely a paragraph to the Mali Empire, while dedicating entire chapters to European kingdoms that controlled far less territory and wielded far less influence during the same period. Consider the implications of this historical amnesia. Mansa Musa's net worth, $400 billion plus. Empire-wide wealth, easily in the trillions by contemporary metrics. We're talking about an empire whose economic output eclipsed many European kingdoms of the same era. Yet how many people today could locate Mali on a map, let alone describe its achievements? How many understand that when European explorers finally reached West Africa, they weren't discovering unknown lands. They were encountering the remnants of civilizations that had been more advanced than their own for centuries. The manuscripts of Timbuktu, many hidden away during colonial periods, are finally being digitized and studied by international scholars. What they're discovering is revolutionizing our understanding of medieval African achievement. Mathematical theorems, astronomical observations, medical procedures, legal frameworks, all developed in Africa, often centuries before similar developments in Europe. These discoveries raise profound questions about how we understand human civilization's development. If Africa was producing such advanced scholarship and technology, what other achievements have been lost to historical bias? How many other civilizations have been erased from our collective memory? The Mali Empire's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how history is written and by whom. It challenges us to question the narratives we've been taught and to seek out the stories that have been deliberately suppressed. As we uncover more evidence of Mali's achievements, we begin to see not just an isolated success story, but part of a broader pattern of African innovation that spans millennia. From the mathematical principles developed in ancient Egypt to the metallurgical advances of medieval West Africa, The continent's contributions to human knowledge have been systematically undervalued and forgotten. Before we conclude this journey into one of history's most remarkable civilizations, I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel. We're committed to bringing you more stories like this, forgotten histories, suppressed discoveries, and the incredible achievements of civilizations that mainstream education has overlooked. The Mali Empire's legacy lives on not just in the physical structures that still dot the West African landscape, but in the questions it forces us to ask about progress, civilization, and the true nature of human achievement. In a world increasingly connected by global communication, perhaps it's time to reconnect with the global civilizations that came before us. To understand that human brilliance has never been limited by geography, race, or the prejudices of those who write the history books. The Mali Empire reminds us that the stories we tell about the past shape the future we create, and sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we've been told to forget.